I have successfully clawed my way through New Orleans, which, oh, it's frustrating. I listen to people on the radio, and apparently this is normal, this nightmarish traffic they have here at this time of the day. So I am through that. I am still eastbound on 10. I am just to the east of Baton Rouge. I am on, no, I'm not. I'm on Interstate 12, which kind of is the bypass of New Orleans. So you don't have to dip down in there. And I have to make my announcement on here that I do not read the messages scrolling on the screen because YouTube says I can't do it, so I don't do it. But I was going to tell a war story here. Wow, Sam's Club is $2.12 for gas. Huh. I'll see if somebody wants to jump on here. Yeah, well, that traffic is, ooh, that was painful. But at least now we're moving. Let me, get my gas mileage reset here. Alright, stop for gas. Like I said, I'll give it a minute here. We are on Interstate 12, north of New Orleans, across Lake Pontchartrain. Still going eastbound here, so give me a few. See if I can get somebody, a couple people. See if I get a few people to jump on. Get that going. My mother did say this phone looks nice from the screen. Okay, give it a few minutes here. I am still eastbound. I'm on Interstate 12, which is the bypass of New Orleans right now. And I am eastbound. Lake Pontchartrain is going to be on my right side. And my next turn is on Interstate 65 north, and that is going towards Montgomery, so into Alabama. And I don't have anybody on board. Okay. Standing by to stand by. I got a little symbol up there in the corner that says Top Fans. I don't know how that works. Alrighty, give it a couple minutes here. Eastbound Interstate 12. This is the bypass that goes around New Orleans to the east. So you don't have to dip down on Interstate 10. Ah, there, cruise control for the first time in an hour. Woo! Alrighty. Let's see what happens. 23 miles per gallon. Alright, I think maybe that fixed the problem. I'll give it a few more minutes here and see if anybody wants to jump on. So far, no takers. Wrong way. Let's see. Oh, 24 miles per gallon. Okay, apparently the money I spent on this van is paying off because the wind isn't blowing and I am currently getting 24 miles per gallon. So that is a good sign. I finally seem to have gotten my gas mileage back because it had started dropping here about a month ago. Ooh, there's a line of cars on that bridge. Holy crap. Now if I can just keep this up to get out of town, I will be a happy camper. Give it a minute here. I think I'm escaping out the east side of Baton Rouge right now. If you're just jumping on, this is Interstate 12, I-12 eastbound. This is kind of like the bypass of New Orleans. It goes around eastbound. And I have to make this announcement. I'm not allowed to read the screen or respond to it when I'm driving. That's something that YouTube has as a rule. But I'll let you know where we are. I stopped and got gas, and there is a bumper-to-bumper nightmare getting into New Orleans around rush hour time. As you know, this dude can turn his lights on. It is a lot darker out here than it is on the screen. The screen makes it look light. It's not. This dude next to me doesn't have his lights on. He's hard to see, even though I can see him here on the screen. Wow, look at that. Anyway, the topic today, let's see here, wait a second. I am getting 24 miles per gallon. So apparently the money spent getting my van work done is paying off, because I am currently showing literally 24.4 miles per gallon, which is absolutely freaking wonderful, because it was down to 18 here. The topic I wanted to babble on while we're driving along here, and I discussed this with my wife, what do I talk about? You could go near the speed. Katrina, you remember that? Happened back in 2005. At the time that Katrina kicked off, I was flying. I was working in the Gulf, flying the oil and gas industry. And when storms come up like that, they evacuate the Gulf. They get everybody out of there because people have gotten killed in these storms. And so they shut everything down. They shut all the pipelines down, and they lock all the buildings up. And everybody gets on an aircraft. Everybody gets on a boat, and they get out of there. And what usually happens is every company out there waits till the last possible second, and then they go into panic mode, and they want to bring everything out of the freezer because they've got steaks and stuff that you can't carry, and every company wants an extra aircraft because they've got so many people, which we don't have, and it's a nightmare. So you evacuate everybody out of the Gulf, and you put your aircraft in hangars or get them out of the area, and you park them. You let the storm go by, and the storm was Hurricane Katrina, and that hit, that pretty much hit New Orleans almost head on, and what they call the dirty side of the storm hit the city really bad. Anybody tuning in right now, I am on Interstate 12 eastbound north of New Orleans here. I'm in Louisiana right now, and I'm going to somewhere in Alabama, then turning north on 65 at 173 miles. So I'll be here for a few minutes. And I was at home, and we knew there was a flooding in New Orleans. We didn't really know much about it. It was on the news. The media was just getting in there, and I was off hitch. And the boss man calls me and says, "Hey, I need you to go to Baton Rouge." And I went, "Huh?" I was off hitch. And I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Go to the airport." He said, "Go to the airport in Baton Rouge and look for Jay's, our head mechanic." And I went, "Oh, okay." So I packed all my bags, got in my trusty Volkswagen Bug, and I boogied on over there. And the Baton Rouge airport is not that big, but there was a wall of traffic and cars and just people everywhere. And we had a tool truck. It was called Shamu. Shamu was a big white tool truck. And I found the mechanics, and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And now I'm wearing shorts and sandals and t-shirts in September, right? August, September, back in 05. It's hot out. And I get there, and I walk up, and I go, "Hey, guys, what's going on?" And he looks at me, and there's another pilot, a guy I used to fly with named Matt. And Matt says, "Hey, I need you to go with me on a flight." And I go, "Oh, great, where are we going?" He goes, "Down to the city." I went, "Oh, okay." And I grabbed my flying gear, still dressed like a hobo, and I walked out to the ramp, and he points, he goes, "That one." And he's pointing at a helicopter I've never seen before. And I went, "Oh, okay." It's some aircraft. It's not new. It's new to the company. I'd never seen it before. And helicopters, especially older helicopters, they're like old cars. They all have like a personality. Well, I didn't have a chance to learn this aircraft's personality, and once I got it started, I couldn't figure out how to get the radios turned on for a while because the switch was in a really weird location. But anyway, I get the radios fired up, and he said, "Just follow me." And it's late in the afternoon, and we head down there, and I get a pretty good aerial view of New Orleans. And the feds put what's called a temporary flight restriction, a TFR, over the airspace. And they had an AWACS plane, one of those radar planes flying around, and his call sign was Omaha 44, and you had to contact him. And I had our air-to-air frequency dialed up, and Matt contacts Omaha 44 and calls us in as a flight of 2. And I went, "All right, we're 2. We're flying kind of in formation." We went down there, and I got to get an overhead view of what was going on in New Orleans. The eastern side of town was underwater, just completely underwater, and the western side of town was just tore up. The buildings were torn up and whatnot. And we both had these women on board. These 2 little skinny women were in the aircraft with us, and they worked what was kind of like a nursing home down there. They had residents that lived there with them. It was on a big house. And when the storm kicked off, for some reason, these 2 left, and then they were going back to get all their charges, I guess we call them, their people, but they couldn't get down there because you couldn't drive down in that area, which kind of was not really a good idea, but they left them for a couple of days, so we went down to get them, and they said, yeah, land over here is a park, and the park was kind of in a high spot, so we shoot an approach into this park. Now, mind you, it's getting dark outside. You can see fires burning, which I don't understand where a fire got involved in a flood, but there were fires burning. There were some emergency lights. You could see people milling around, some vehicles moving in certain areas. It's just like a war zone. Like, okay. We landed this park. There's nobody there. We kind of spread out, and it gets really dark, and we told them, hurry, go run. Said it's right down the street here. So they climb over this chain link fence, and you can see them wading through, not waist deep, but close to waist deep water, and they just kind of disappear into the darkness. And we turned all our lights off. We're still turning. You're not supposed to do this, but we left the aircraft running, and we locked down the controls and got out, and we were armed. This is not a safe situation. It took these people a half an hour to come back with 4 people. I was like, okay, is this it? And they go, no, there's more. We had to help over the fence. And when they got over the fence is when you kind of figured out, when you start working with these people, that they weren't running at 100% capacity. And I went, okay. So I kind of took them by the hand and I walked them over and I said, stand right here, don't go anywhere. Went back. I had to jump over the fence and help another group over. I go back and half the people I just moved are gone. Where'd they go? Oh, they're over there somewhere. So I'm running. I don't have a flashlight. I'm running around in the dark. I'm like, okay, where are they? They're over here wandering around. I don't know what they were doing. But I rounded them up and then I stuck them in the aircraft. I just got them, the aircraft's turning. I put them in the back seat, put their seatbelts on, slammed the doors, went back, moved a couple more people, helped them over this chain link fence. And the last guy's pushing a shopping cart. And we're like, dude, we don't have room for luggage. And it wasn't luggage, there was a woman in the shopping cart. A very old, very thin woman was laying on her back with her feet sticking up in the air. And how she didn't drown on the trip from their building to the fence is a mystery. But I, again, jumped over the fence in this nutsack deep water and picked her up and handed her to Matt and carried her over and stuck her in the aircraft. We got to get out of here. We've been on the ground like an hour at this point, turning. And this is when Matt mentions to me that he's not an instrument pilot, and he had what he described as very limited night flying experience. It's pitch black right now. I went, oh, geez, okay. I said, I turned on the cab light in the back. There's like an interior cab light, and I said, just follow me. And I took off first, and he fell in behind me, so he could use my cab light as a reference point. And we flew back. We landed in Baton Rouge, and there were people waiting to pick these people up. We landed, got them out, and Matt walked over to me. I was wearing sandals when I was wading around in the water, and he's wearing boots and jeans, and he took his boot off and poured water out of him. So he had been flying with a load of water in both of his boots, which is bleh, for 25, 30 minutes, however long it took to get back. That's like yuck. And because of Katrina happening and everybody evacuating the area and FEMA coming in and all the stuff, there wasn't a hotel room, and I'm not making this number up, there was not a hotel room within 300 miles of New Orleans. And we're in Baton Rouge. And some people slept in their cars in the parking lot. Some people with a tool truck, Shamu, had a bunk in it, and one of the mechanics slept. Everybody just kind of said, find some place to sleep and we'll see you in the morning. I went into the FBO, the airport little building there, and most airports have a pilot's lounge, and it's like midnight, and I'm looking for the pilot lounge just on the slim outside chancellor's room, and they did have one, and it was a little, because a tiny airport had a tiny lounge, and it just had 2 big recliner chairs and a TV, and it was way down the hall, kind of out of the way, and it was dark in there, but there was somebody in the other bunk, in the other chair, and he was, sitting upright, and I said, hey, has anybody used this one? He said, no. I said, cool. Sorry, I had to drink. And I climbed into this chair, and I was like, whoa, and he said, you just get here? And I said, no, I'm a pilot, I'm doing this, and he goes, he said, I'm not a pilot, but I'm from here, and I came down here he brought, like, baby diapers and formula and stuff like that. He brought stuff with him to give away, and I was like, cool, and he said, I'm from here. And we ended up talking for quite a while, what's going on, but I never got to look at the guy because, it's dark in the room, and at some point I fell asleep. then the sun comes up and I wake up and I sit up and he's waking up, and I'm 6'4", and I don't bump into a lot of people my height, but when I do, I take note of it if they're my height and or taller. And I stood up and he stood up. We're like attention. Other thing that caught my attention is it was Harry Connick Jr., the singer slash actor, which I had no idea that's who I had been talking to that evening. So that caught me off guard. Real nice guy, by the way. And then we started doing our flights down there, and there is the Saints have a training camp. There's like the stadium for the Saints, and then they have their little building where they do all their training. They have like a little miniature field outside, and they said, go follow him, go down, and that's kind of where you go every day, and you'll get your assignment. So we flew down there and landed on the grass on their little half football field, and I think it was almost directly across the street there was a baseball diamond, and there was an Army setup over there that was giving away aircraft fuel. Anybody who could land a helicopter there got fuel. And I'm like, cool. So we had a free refueling spot, and I could always hit it and just give gang signs and he'd pump gas. And they started giving us assignments, and one of the first things they did is when the storm was coming, they gave people the option to go into the football stadium, the Superdome. I don't know what it's called, the big dome down there they have. And people were in there by the thousands, went in there and spent the night in that place. They didn't know how big. They flushed their toilets. It got bad. And I didn't know this at the time, but right up against the west side of the dome, there are 2 heliports. You can actually land a helicopter right up against the building. And I had no idea. And they said, you're going to go over there and start shuttling people. So I said, okay. So we took off and we'd land there and come in and set down. And the guy says, how many can you carry? And because of the conditions in the aircraft, you carry 5 bodies. So I would just hold out my hand, give them 5, and they would throw 5 people in it, and I would take off. And you would he says, take them over to the airport, NOLA, New Orleans, Louisiana, NOLA Airport. And that's when things got interesting. NOLA is a Class B airspace. It is tightly controlled. The control tower is kind of like a traffic cop, but you have 4 approach controls, 4 departure controls, clearance, delivery, ground, and the tower. And it's Class B, and there's a certain way you speak back and forth with an air traffic controller, and all of that went flying out the window. I mean, out the window. I flip up the frequency, and the only radio frequency that's running is the tower. And 1 million people can listen to somebody talking on the radio, but only one person can talk on the radio at a time. And I'm looking around, and there is a wall of helicopters flying towards the airport. There's like 25 aircraft in the sky, and we're all in a small area, and we're all going towards the airport, so we're kind of converging. And I've got the radio dialed up, and I go, how in God's name are we going to figure this out? And the tower says, they called it triage, which is, where the airplanes pull in and they stop, and that little catwalk comes out and touches the side of the aircraft. They open the door. We're heading towards that, and the clearance into the airspace was, everybody coming in from the east, sort yourselves out. Okay. So we're all just kind of looking at each other and trying to not crash into each other, and we landed, and there's just 2 rows of helicopters, and there's a guy people driving those little baggage carts, little open top baggage carts, and they're driving around, pulling up to the aircraft, and just opening doors, dragging bodies out, throwing them on the luggage carts, and driving off. And there's like 2 rows of helicopters, like 10 long. And again, all radio communications have disintegrated down to who's ready to leave triage. And some guy would say, right number 2, no tail numbers, right number 2, go. And that's literally how we got in and out of there. Who's ready to leave? Left number 4, go. And you pull pitch, fly out, go back over. And we went back and forth. And one time when I landed, they pulled people out, and then they threw in bags of dog food, which caught me off guard. They threw in like those 50-pound bags. They threw in a dump truck load of them into the back of the aircraft. And I flew back to pick a lane, dude, pick a lane. Then I flew back over, and they opened up the aircraft. They took the dog food out and started pouring it on the ground at the Superdome, because people had brought their pets with them from the storm, And they wouldn't put the dogs in, they wouldn't allow the dogs and cats and stuff in the aircraft, so they were just like running around up on the second level of the dome, because down below it was flooded. It was a weird situation, but they were just pouring dog food on the ground. These dogs were attacking it, and cats, they were all eating whatever was there, but there were dogs, cats running all over that place. It was, whoa, that guy's in a hurry. It was pretty much a madhouse there, and we went back and forth. I don't know how many times we did that. And then they started sending us on different missions to go to different places. And we had FEMA inspectors on board looking at leaky gas coming out of train cars and all kinds of strange. Wait a minute, here we go. I took some engineers into a golf course. We landed at a golf course, and they had to go check out the pump stations, because they have some pumps that are supposed to, kick the water out, which the dikes failed completely from waves and stuff crashing into them. And I was standing around guarding the aircraft, and this man comes walking around the corner with a teenage girl in tow, carrying animal suitcases, those little carrying cases. And I looked at him, I said, "What are you guys doing?" He said, "Oh, we're trying to go check on our pets. We left them on the second floor of the house with food and water." And I said, "How far are you trying to go?" And they go, "Oh, it's over in this neighborhood, but this is kind of where the water started." And I said, "I got an idea, follow me." And I walked them over to the golf course and put them in the helicopter and flew them over there so they could see. They couldn't get to their house. The water was probably 8 feet deep, but their animals were all on the second floor, so I couldn't help them get in or out, but I could show them, what they were up against. So I kind of felt good. The guy tried to tip me, which I said, Dad, keep that. You got enough problems to worry about. Don't worry about it. But I enjoyed doing that. I felt good by being able to help those people, just to give them an eyeball view of what they were fighting. I don't know where all these cars are coming from. Hold on a second here. I'm going to go around this guy. This guy's driving slower than me, and I drive pretty slow. There we go. Supercharger. We had the problem with big disasters like that is, if you've ever watched a post-apocalyptic movie, you'll notice when everything falls apart, there's people that are just looking for that opportunity to cause problems. New Orleans was full of people doing that. And the first couple of weeks down there was pretty dangerous. And there were people doing a lot of looting and whatnot. To the east of the Superdome, I think is what it's called, there's a really nice neighborhood based on the sizes of the house and the space between them, because it was probably 10 feet deep, 10 or 12 feet of water. And we saw a guy in a boat, like a little John boat, rowing around, and he was going up to these nice houses and tying off and breaking the windows and climbing in on the second floor and then going through the house. And then we watched him from the distance, and he was just loading up the boat. So in a good Christian-like manner, we hovered up over his boat, shot it full of holes, and sank it. In a good Christian-like way. Just trying to help him out. But one of the strangest things, the two shooting incidents that happened around me, is we were picking up people. There was a highway that goes by, like there's a convention center down there, a big old bridge, and there were helicopters lined up on the highway, just tail rotor to nose. There was like 10 of us there, and the AWACS plane came up and said, "Everybody hold what you got. We got an active shooter over by the convention center," or whatever they called it. And we went, okay, because they were trying to slow down humanitarian, because once the humanitarian stuff is over, they're going to start paying attention to law enforcement, and they wanted to slow down the humanitarian. So there was some guy firing an aircraft, and it was in the downtown area, right in the middle of the city. And we're sitting there running, and I look up, and all of a sudden one of our company helicopters takes off and it starts flying towards the downtown area. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. He was mad again. And then he came back and he landed in the same spot, and then the AWACS plane goes, "Okay, everybody's back in business." And I came up on our frequency and I said, "Dude, what's going on?" He goes, "I'll tell you later." I was like, all right. And what had happened was, the shooter was in the downtown area, and he was leaning out of a building, and there was kind of a dry spot right around where he was, and he was firing an aircraft. So a guy came over, they took the passenger door off the aircraft, just 2 pins, you pop it off. The guy got in with an M60, which is a belt-fed machine gun, and said, "Take us over there." And this guy stuck his head out the door to start shooting at the aircraft, and this dude opened up on him, and he ducked back in the building, and then the dude ran out a side door, still armed, ran out a side door, jumped in a green car, and he said, follow him, and he's flying between the buildings, and Matt said, we got this guy cornered, and this dude opened up on this dude's car. He said the car was green, but by the time they got done shooting at it, it wasn't green anymore, it had no color. How many bullets do you have to put in a car to make it no color to it? And he said they just hammered this car, which was... And the other one was, again, around that same time, we took off 0 Dark 30 and flew down to that training camp, and a Black Hawk helicopter landed right in front of us, and we landed next to it. And these two guys got out with gun cases, and they're all dusty, dirty, and they have that brass bag. You fire your weapons, you pick up your brass. Well, we're walking in the building, and their brass bags were making all this noise because they were full of empties. I went, oh, this is interesting. And we walk in the building, and they lean these gun cases against a wall. And they had this room is kind of like a stadium seating with tables, and it's where they talk about the football games. And there's no power. They had a generator that gave them some lighting, but there was nothing else operational, no air conditioning or anything. And these guys are out in the hallway talking, and there's a little door in the back you could slip into the room. Well, I slipped into that room, and I was in the back row with a clipboard, and I'm just drawing pictures and listening. And these guys walked in the room, and they're all talking amongst themselves, and the guy in charge looked up at the TV screen, which was not on, and asked the question, what's the score? And these two guys compared notes, and they said something to the effect of 173 to nothing. And that was the last time we had to deal with shooters, was after that night. And I don't know where these guys went, and I don't know what their rules of engagement were, but there wasn't a whole lot of people shooting anymore after those guys got done that night. So apparently they took care of a bunch of problems. And then that whole operation slowly wound down as time went on. And then 4 weeks later, they had tropical storm, I think it was Rita, which hit a little farther to the west and tore up that area. And then we had to kind of pivot over and start working that mess over there. It was like a double whammy. So after living in this part of the world, I'm north of Houston, but living in this part of the world, I know I'm never going to live that close to the coast. It's just, that stuff, those storms come around a little too regular for me. Just, ugh. And they cause a lot of problems. They have that storm surge, and I remember flying in from Rita, and when a storm surge happens, it pushes everything loose in front of it. So there's a lot of wreckage and stuff, and we would find it piled up against the trees 10 miles inland, which means they had a wall of water that went 10 miles in before the pressure wave stopped. I mean, it's absolutely incredible how much damage those storms can cause. But that was my Katrina thing. That was my Katrina story. It slowly started to wind down. I think the company I was working for was making some serious bank on it. We weren't getting paid regular, but I think the company I was working for at the time got paid a lot of money by FEMA doing that stuff, trying to fill that out. But they put, again, it's a temporary flight restriction. It's a big box over the New Orleans area, and it basically tells pilots, you need permission to come in here. And you had to talk to that AWACS plane. And I kind of asked him, what's that about? He goes, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry that owns an airplane is going to fly down there and rubberneck. It's the biggest flooding of an American city ever. He goes, and every tourist, every rubberneck is going to come down here and go, ooh, ah, and fly around and look at it. And we've got too many people down here. You might get, in the tight controlled area at an airport, you might get a dozen airplanes on the scope flying at the same time. And this guy, some dude came up and tried to get into the airspace, and I hear him giving those traditional, long, drawn-out radio communications that don't work under these conditions. And the controller said, I can't work you into this. And he goes, oh, well, when you're a blip on the radar screen, you hit a button that says ident, and it makes you bigger. You kind of poof. And this guy says, I could squawk ident. And he says, from the surface to 1,000 feet within 3 miles of the airport, I have 400 targets on my scope. I can't pick you out of this. Go away. And the guy went, oh. And then the guy went away. Ironically, 2 aircraft got destroyed during the Katrina mess, total. One was a Puma, a Super Puma. I don't know who, what, or why, but I used to have pictures of it. It was sitting on a grass strip, and it had rolled onto its side, and the rotor blades were gone, and the bits and pieces were laying there. And the other aircraft that got destroyed belonged to our company, and we only had 8 or 10 birds, because that was the whole fleet was down there. And it was the other one belonged to us. If you've ever watched that 1987 movie, Lethal Weapon, with Mel Gibson with the cool mullet, the girl gets in the limo and she runs off, and the helicopter chases her, and he's thumping the top of the limousine with the helicopter. And there's another scene where the helicopter pops up behind a cliff, and the guy shoots a guy with a rifle and flies off, and old Mel's emptying his handgun at it. If you look closely on the door, the tail number, the end number on the door is 230 Charlie Alpha. And that was a Hollywood helicopter, and our company had bought it somehow. And it was known within the company as Lethal Weapon. Well, one of our pilots was doing some aerial, this is towards the backside of the mess, had some AP photographers on board, and they had taken all the doors off the aircraft, and they were slowly circling in a house, it's a neighborhood, and there were some people getting off the roof onto a boat because the water was still pretty deep. And the AP guys were taking pictures, and all of a sudden the aircraft pitched nose high, did a couple of 360s, and fell through a house. And what had happened was an Army Black Hawk had slowed down and more or less hover taxied over him, not too far away, and the downdraft stole his air, and the aircraft just plummeted and landed on a house. And we ended up airlifting the aircraft out. I don't think they ever repaired it, but it hit the top. I got to go see it on this guy's roof, and when the rotor blade slapped the house, it karate chopped the roof. A tip of the rotor blade broke off, went through the neighbor's house into their kitchen, knocked their dishwasher loose, and sent it flying through the house, and it slammed into the wall on the other side, and it pretty much exploded. You could see the drag marks. We looked in the windows, but they had to airlift the bird out, and nobody got hurt. Mike got a little tiny cut on the side of his head, but nobody got hurt. And one of the AP guys started laughing, and he said, "I've been in 2 helicopters in my entire life. Do you want to guess how many helicopter crashes I've been in? Just guess." And we're like, "No way." And he goes, "Way. I'm 2 for 2. I think I'm done flying around in helicopters." I'm like, "Oh, jeez. Yeah, stay away from that guy." But they went after, it was not an Army Black Hawk, it was a Navy or a Coast Guard or somebody, or they had an official inquiry into it, and they went into this big meeting in it's called the Navy, I don't know who it was. They said, in no uncertain terms, "This is not our fault. We didn't cause this. We didn't do this. Here's a check for the value of the aircraft, but we didn't do this. This wasn't our fault." My boss went, "Yeah, okay." So they ended up paying the bird, paying for the destroyed helicopter. But that slowly wound down, and then there was the nightmare of getting the offshore world, the oil and gas, back on Highway Patrol, state police, right there. Getting the oil and gas turned back on, and that was a long, drawn-out process too, because that oil and gas, it's all flowing into the beach, and that's kind of where the bread and butter of the oil and gas industry comes from. That's one of the reasons gas prices started spiking in 2005, by the way. All right, I've been babbling now for over half an hour. That was something that popped into my head, wanted to talk about. I am in Louisiana eastbound on what is this? Am I still on 10? I am 37 miles from Slidell, Louisiana eastbound. I think this might be 10 or 12. I don't know what it is at this point. I know 10 dips down into New Orleans and comes back up and tags into this. But we're between those two. But I'll let you guys off the hook tonight. I just wanted to babble a little bit and show you what it looks like. If I get up in the mountains and it looks interesting, I may come back on again. But I'll catch up with you guys later.